Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today on the Fax Me That podcast. It is an interesting podcast today, to say the least. Not because of my guest, but because of the stories behind it. As we all know, the magnitude and the size of this case and the stories that take you left and right, up and down, we will probably never be able to wrap our brains around this. I need everybody to understand the importance of this podcast wasn't to match up timelines or even talk about how certain things happen, or maybe we missed this or maybe we missed that. It wasn't about any of that. It was just to simply talk about feelings of a detective who was 1,000% involved with this case. I know there was others, but today we had the privilege of interviewing and meeting with Detective Ray Hermosillo. He is a great guy. He loves his family and he loves his community, and he is definitely dedicated, not just to this case, but many more to come. And it was an honor to speak with him today. It was fun. And just to have some of his raw feeling. And our special guest brought so much clarity as well to some of the things that happened besides police work. So without further ado, sit back and relax, enjoy, and remember to like and subscribe. And if you want to see more interviews like this, let me know. We'll make it happen. Everybody, to another episode of Fax Me That podcast. We have a special guest with us today. Let's see. 2001, started off as a police officer, canine handler and SWAT team leader till 2010. Became a sergeant, supervisor, and investigation in 2019, and he is a lieutenant now. Is that correct?
That's correct, my man.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Lieutenant Ray Hermosillo. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Such a pleasure to have you, man.
Thanks, man.
It's an honor for me to sit here with you. As mentioned earlier, this podcast is it's a little unique in a sense that, here we take off our ties. We just kind of relax and we just have an organic conversation.
For sure.
We just want to talk about some of the things, your feeling, your perspective on some things, and also maybe, just some insight. And more than anything, just on how you're feeling about things.
Okay.
We also have a special guest joining us later on, which we're not going to reveal until a little bit. But Ray, let's start here. So first things first, I want to know a little bit about you. When did you want to become an officer? Why a police officer?
That's a funny question, actually. So I was little, and I remember sitting home one day. I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, and I had a bad cold. And I was home for about a week during the day. I lived in California, and I started watching Chips during the day. That's back with Frank Poncherello, John Baker on those motorcycles. Yeah. So I started watching this, and every day it was on mid-morning. But I'm like, man, that would be a cool profession. And I got hooked as soon as I started watching it. They showed that, pursuits, arresting people.
Sure.
And I've always wanted that. I've always had that personality where I wanted to help people. But when I saw that as a kid, I was instantly hooked. And so from then on, I wanted to do nothing but be a cop.
That's dope. That's good. That's awesome.
I mean, there was nothing else as an option. I was going to be a cop.
And you joined the force in 2001.
November 2001. Yep.
Cool. So we have a couple things in common. We're both from bigger cities, and we migrated to smaller towns, and we've kind of learned to live in these smaller towns, coming from a bigger city. As you all know, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and my parents are from Latino descent, and that's the case with you as well, except for you're from Los Angeles, right?
Los Angeles area, yeah, San Fernando Valley.
And then you came later on in life and settled in Rexburg.
Right.
Excellent.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's kind of one of those stories, where little kids see things and they always say, "Oh, I'm going to do that when they get older," and then sometimes it doesn't turn out that way, right?
Yeah.
Like I always thought I was going to be perhaps maybe like a lawyer or something like that, but that didn't work for me. But I'm glad it worked for you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, you're doing a good job with it. So good for you.
Thank
Good for you. So I think so. Here's the deal. Everybody knows the story. Everybody knows, kind of what happened and when transpired down here in Rexburg. I don't necessarily want to start from from a timeline or anything like that. I guess the biggest question that we have is when did you, okay, so run back when you got the call.
Bro, do I need one of these?
No, you're good. Don't worry about it. That's just for me.
That looks
No.
good.
It's just
It looks
for me.
professional.
Well, you gotta fake it until you make it. So that's what we're doing here. We can hear you. No, we're good. In fact, it's picking you up as well. So, when did you get the call? Like, let me ask you this: did you hear about this case or know anything about it before you got the call about the Jeep?
No, so I had no clue what was going on in Arizona. The first time I heard about this was when I got a call from Fremont County.
Okay, so let me stop you there. What day was it that you got the call?
It was Friday, November 1st, 2019.
Okay, what time? About what time?
Probably 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. What were you thinking? What were you doing? Did you have breakfast before? What were you doing?
No, so we were at the police department, just chilling, going over cases, things that Halloween was the night before, October 31st. So we're telling stories about kids or whatever, and I see my cell phone ring. I pick it up. I recognize the number as a Fremont County deputy. So I pick it up, and he's telling me the story. Hey, there's a Jeep in your jurisdiction that was possibly involved in an attempted homicide down in Gilbert. So I'm sitting there in my office. Okay, yeah, just listening, and he said, hey, I'm almost down there. We're driving down there right now. Can I just meet you at Maverick, which is a gas station? It was a couple blocks away from where they were suspected to be living.
Right.
So I'm like, cool. So I jump in my car, meet them at the gas station. They jump in with me. They're telling me about the story, and we drive over. And, it kicked off from there.
So when they were giving you the backstory in the car, at that point were you like, I'm gonna be into some shit, or like?
No, it was like they didn't have the entire story. So the only backstory I was getting was this Jeep may be involved in a homicide. And then they talked about, well, there's this suspicious death too that we had up in this county, in Fremont County.
And that was with Charles, correct?
No, that was with Tanny.
Got it. Okay.
Tanny.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
So I really didn't put two and two together. Like, it's just, okay, I'll keep my eye out for it. And then I didn't get a lot of information from them. So I went back to the police department, contacted Gilbert police to get more information. And that's when I'm like, man, this is going to be big. Because then they started faxing me up a spreadsheet with people's names and pictures and the players in this whole thing. And then you start getting this backstory of a homicide that took place in self-defense back then.
Got it.
A suspicious death up in Fremont County, an attempted homicide down there as well. So you have all these players, and you're thinking, man, those guys got some problems down there. But yeah, I'll help you find the Jeep as much as I can.
So when you went to the residence, the Jeep was gone. And then what happened from there?
So we sat on that house for that was Friday. We sat on that house. We started surveillance immediately after talking with Gilbert Police Department.
Take us to school on these surveillances. So when you say surveillance, for the average Joe, we think you're sitting in a car, you're probably enjoying some donuts and watching. What's happening in these surveillances? Like, you sit there, you're watching this house. I mean, talk to me.
So we did what's called intermittent surveillance, which was, you sit on it when you have nothing else going on, because we have active cases that we still have to do. So when you have dead time, you go sit, watch the house. We started that day, November 1st, with the surveillance. After I talked to Gilbert and they said what was kind of going on, we assigned a couple people to also do surveillance at Chad Daybell's house. And that's when, they were able to track Chad and Lori together that day. Mm-hmm. Still didn't find the Jeep. I didn't find the Jeep until Monday. But we had surveillance Friday afternoon, Friday evening, intermittently through the weekend with patrolmen. And then I was coming home from the gym Monday morning, and I happened to look over. I have to drive by that place to get to my place. I look over and I see that gray Jeep parked outside. I'm like, oh shit. So I pull in, make some phone calls, get it towed, and get it impounded.
So right away they came down, got it on the tow truck, got it impounded, and you guys started going through it, and, you know.
So we get it to the impound, and it's not my case, right? I'm just doing this for Arizona.
Right.
So I get on the phone with Arizona. Hey, I got your Jeep. They said, all right, hang tight. We'll get a warrant issued so we can go through the Jeep. So that Jeep sat in our custody for a week and a half until they flew up, and then they had a warrant to go through it, and that's when it all kicked off.
Wow. So what in that Jeep was found that maybe, you know, that was like, okay, you know, this is going to lead to this, or?
You know, there was really nothing in the Jeep that was found that, you know, they took the infotainment center, which is the console that has like GPS locations, things like that. They took that. They had a warrant to seize that. Went through the Jeep, looked at receipts, just crap that was in the Jeep. But there was really nothing that stuck out. And at that point, they said, hey, you know, you've been watching this place. Have you seen a little boy? And I'm like, no, man, I haven't seen anything. No kids, no nothing. All right, well, there's a little boy that hasn't spoken with his grandma for a while. His grandma's concerned. And if you see him, let us know. But, you know, we'll let you know if you need anything else from you guys. And that was the last contact we had with them for a couple weeks.
So it went from the Jeep that was located, and then, by the way, there's a boy missing. If you can keep your eyes on him.
Yeah, not missing necessarily, but more concerned that grandma hasn't talked to him. Yeah, hasn't talked to him for a while.
Got it. Okay.
And they said, we're going to look for him in Arizona. If we need anything more from you, we'll let you know. And that's kind of where we left it.
Yeah. Okay. So then when did the thick of that started happening with, you know, maybe getting more involved with his search, or?
So November 25th of 2019, I got a call from Ryan Pillar, who's a detective with Gilbert Police.
Okay.
And he says, hey, we haven't been able to find this little boy. Would you mind doing a welfare check tomorrow morning just to see if he's there? Absolutely, no problem. So myself and another detective, Dave Hope, went to Lori's residence November 26th of 2019. And that's where I made contact with Lori's brother, Alex, and Chad Daybell.
So they were there.
Yeah.
You knock on the door, or they were already out?
They were unloading a pickup truck into a garage.
Okay.
So we roll up. They're unloading stuff out of this truck. I walk up on the driver's side and make
Do you know
contact.
what they were unloading? What were they unloading?
You know, it looked like just boxes, like they were moving in. That's what it looked like.
Got it.
They were moving in.
And this was at whose place?
Lori's apartment.
This was Lori's apartment. Yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah. And they were just unloading stuff. And then, what was Chad wearing that day? What did he look like? Do you remember? Did he have his?
You know, he had his white dad sneakers on, the jeans, just like a dad, goofy looking.
And I don't mean to go left with this, but I talk to my wife all the time, and I often wonder what a character like this is gonna be like in jail. Like, what is he gonna do? You know, like. This guy is, he's a geek, man. Like, this guy wasn't cut from that cloth, you know. The criminal, you know, he should. I feel bad for him in a sense that, man, he's gonna get it, you know. Yeah. How does a person like this live in a jungle, you know?
He's not built for prison.
Yeah, I didn't think so, and just the way he looks with his, you know, just complete goofball, man. So anyway, when I always wondered, like, what did the guy look like when you pulled up on it, and then you saw Alex as well. Did Alex come off kind of like, I'm like the bodyguard type of person, so let me take all of the questions you have, or was it?
No, brother, I'll be honest with you, like. I got a different vibe from Alex. So when I started talking to him, I had that. Look, I've been a cop at this point at 2020, so been a cop for 20 years, right?
Seen a lot of characters.
Dealt with a lot of bad people. When I started talking to Alex that day, and he had that 1,000-yard stare, like stare right through you, and I'm asking him about the whereabouts of JJ. And I already knew what he was capable of because we had already done our research on him from Gilbert. I already knew he had killed Charles Vallow. I knew he was a suspect in an attempted homicide of Brandon Boudreaux. So I knew what he's capable of. I know he's packing weapons. And I make contact with him, and he keeps approaching me, getting closer and closer. It takes a couple steps. And I'm like, you know, brother, back off for a minute. Just give me my space. I'll give you yours, right? Let's talk. I got a bad vibe from him. And you don't get that very often but when you get it, you know you get it.
Talk about that, bro. Talk about that vibe. So that vibe, was it like a dark vibe? Was it like this guy is into things? Like, what kind of vibe?
It was the vibe where I think if he had the opportunity to do something, he would.
He would do it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That must be, for a police officer, I'm assuming, although trained, that still makes you, where were you at? Were you like, you know what, I'm ready to draw? Like, you were ready for that? Or?
I mean, you're always taught the officer safety, which is, you keep your distance, right?
So that's what you asked for?
Yeah, I was keeping distance because, you can make up distance pretty quick. But yeah, I had that vibe where if he was going to do something, I was ready for it. I wasn't going to draw down on him, right, until he did something, but I knew what he was capable of, so my defenses were already up.
Got it. And where was Chad positioned at the time? Was he?
He was on the other side of the truck talking to another detective.
Oh,
so just Alex and I. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So was Alex packing that day? Do you know?
Not that I could see. It was an open carry.
Got it.
I don't know what was under his shirt or tucked in his pants, but I could see.
So he's talking and he's like walking towards you as he's talking.
As he's talking, yeah.
When he's talking, is he like fumbling through his words? Is he like acting nervous? Is he giving you bullshit? I mean, what is he giving you?
Well, at first I said, "Hey, I'm here to look for JJ." Right? Grandma hasn't seen him, and he said, "No, he's with Kay in Louisiana." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I know that's a lie because Kay is the one that called, and she hasn't talked to JJ for a while." So I said, "Alex, you know what? He's not with Kay because she's the one that's called in this welfare check." And instantly, he wasn't ready for me to ask that question, I don't think, because he looks at Chad, doesn't answer my question, looks at Alex. Chad looks at Alex, and they're looking back and forth like, who's going to say something first, right? Like they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar.
Right.
So I asked him again, where's JJ? And, they're looking back and forth. He's like, oh, you have to ask his mom. She's not here right now. So I asked for her phone number, and he doesn't give it to me. I don't know her phone number, which is BS because I know they're close. So instantly, all these red flags are popping up, right? And the more I talk to him, the more lies I'm getting, the more red flags are coming in, coupled with I know what he's capable of, and my thoughts now are, okay, what's going on with this little boy? Like, what's the reason to lie about where he's at? So after we left there, I talked to Alex. I didn't get anything. He says Lori's in apartment 107, same complex. I said, all right, cool, we're going to go over there and chat with her. And we left, went to apartment 107.
And when you got to 107, she was not there, right?
She wasn't, nobody was there. We got there, knocked on the door.
So, okay, so before we go there, let's talk about this part. So once you left there, you got into the car with the other detective, and your conversation to him was, them boys are full of shit. We need to dig deeper. Something's going on here.
Brother, what's going on? Yeah, something's going on. We both had the same feeling. So we go to 107, we go knock on the door, no answer. So I start walking back to my car. I'm like, we're going to need more people out here, start knocking doors. That detective I'm with starts knocking on neighbors' doors, trying to figure out, have you seen a little boy running around? As I'm walking back to my car, I get to my car and I see Chad Daybell driving down that alley. He's driving a Chevy Equinox at that point. So I stop him, like, hey, come here for a second. So he puts it in park, gets out, and I start a conversation with him. And that's what I'm asking Chad. Well, when's the last time you saw JJ? Or how do you know Lori? And again, red flags are coming up, right? Because I know they're married. And when I ask him, hey, how do you know Lori? Oh, I really don't know her that well. I just know her through Alex. Another lie. Hey, when's the last time you saw JJ? Oh, I saw him back in October at apartment 107. So as I'm talking to him and I'm getting all these stories, the other detective stops knocking on doors, comes over to chat with us. And I say, hey, man, do you have Lori's phone number? No, I don't have it. Okay. So I start asking him some more questions. And as I'm asking him more questions, Detective Hope is now standing right next to me. And I ask him again, so you don't have Lori's number? Like, I need to get a hold of her. And then he gives me her number. And I said,
so he finally gives it to you?
Finally gives it to me. I said, brother, why were you lying to me? What are you lying for? Well, I thought you were accusing me of something. I felt like you were accusing me of something. So he gives me her number. He gets in his car, takes off. I call her phone, no answer. My next call is to my lieutenant, Ron Ball, at the time. And I'm like, Lieutenant, we got something going on. There's a lot more going on than what we're getting. In my gut, I'm feeling there's something wrong with, the whereabouts of JJ. And he said, all right, hang tight. I'll grab a couple more detectives. We'll come out and we'll start knocking.
So when you guys were knocking on these doors, it's just to get general information, if they've seen something, saw something. And then
Brother, at that point, we're just looking for JJ.
Got it. So then take me to once JJ could not be found, what happens after that? Like, what was the next step as far as, how does the pressure fall on these individuals, Lori, Chad, or?
You talking about that day?
Well, after the fact. So you obviously can't find him, right?
Can't find him that day.
Can't find him that day. And then what was the next step from there?
So that day, they end up making contact with Lori.
Okay.
A couple other detectives.
And then now, the detectives made contact with Lori. We saw that on one of the videos.
There's a body cam. Yeah.
Right. Where she goes in and she's basically trying to bullshit. That was a video where one of the officers thought they saw a shadow going back and forth? Yep. Got it. Okay. So they go and talk to her, and what was I guess that was the main. Where's your kids? Right. Okay.
Where's JJ? And she said he's with a family friend in Arizona.
Okay.
So at that point, that's where our investigation goes, right?
Yeah.
She said he's with a family friend. We try to get a hold of that family friend by the name of Melanie Gibb. Unable to get a hold of her. It's now starting to be early evening.
Mm-hmm.
I make a phone call back down to Arizona because that's where she's living. I said, hey, we can't get a hold of her. Would you mind just running over that address, seeing if you can make contact with her? One of the detectives from Gilbert runs over. She's not home. They end up getting her on the cell phone. She says, no, I don't have JJ. He's back in Idaho. So at that point, he calls me back about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night. Hey, JJ's not here.
Sorry. So she didn't have time to let her know. Basically, she didn't have time to have communication with her, say, do me a solid. Cops are going to look for my son. Will you just pick up the call and let him know? She never had that communication. So Melody didn't know to have their back to do that. Or did she just know better and did not want to lie?
Come to find out later.
Okay.
Lori and Chad had called Melanie.
Okay.
Right after we made contact with them at the apartment, mm-hmm. and said, hey, the Rexburg police are going to be calling you. We told them JJ was with you. We need you to lie for us and say JJ's with you. If you need to, go to like a movie theater, take a picture of a couple kids from a distance, say, hey, that's JJ, he's watching movies, whatever. And we need you to do us the solid, like you said. Originally, she said that JJ shouldn't have JJ anymore. She ended up lying to us that day.
Okay, let me stop you real quick. So she thought about what they asked her to do, and she ran with it.
For a minute, she ran with it.
Okay, whether it was a minute or a second, check this out. Whether it was a minute or a second, she played with the notion that, okay, I'll do this for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does that make you feel? Like, doesn't that, knowing now everything, doesn't that make you feel just a little bit like that woman knew, not necessarily that they had died, but they were talking about dark this, dark that. This is a bad person. This is a bad person. This is how we eliminate darkness. This is how we eliminate bad people. Don't you think for 1 second that she would put two and two together and say, wow, if the cops are looking for this boy that are not around, and this is what they were preaching, in your opinion, do you think that she was kind of like, man, something might be happening here?
I hindsight's 2020, right? And I think her involvement in this whole thing and knowing about what they were teaching, backing up a couple years or a year prior to, absolutely. I think she knew kind of what was going to happen, and I'm learning all this later on, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But right then, I didn't know what her involvement was.
Right.
And so when she initially lied to the Gilbert police and said, yeah, he was here, but now he's back in Idaho, like, she's pinning that back on Lori and Chad.
Right. She bounced it back.
I thought, okay, she's going to be an ally. She's on our side. She's looking for JJ and Tylee as well. Later, we find out she was lying to us about some things. Yeah.
What were some of those things that she was lying about?
Well, she never had JJ. JJ was never down there.
Got it.
And I think, my honest opinion, she never came forward when that phone call was made. And if you think there's a child missing and they're in danger, you're going to come forward with the police, right?
Yeah, 1,000%.
Most people.
Yeah.
That call was made to her on November 26th. I didn't hear from her until December 7th or 8th. So there's a week at least that goes by. And then learning that she's meeting with Alex. She's meeting with Zulima, who's another player, or Melanie Boudreaux, who's another player, behind the scenes trying to figure it out. And then I get a call from her attorney saying that she's concerned. Well, in my opinion, she's concerned because they're pinning it on her, right?
Yep.
And now she's coming forward with all this stuff. Why didn't she come forward earlier?
Yeah, and that's why I've always said, I don't know about you, Melanie. I've always had my doubts about you because I think you knew something. You knew the doctrine. You knew what was, and whether you were on board with it or not, you knew. And like Larry, Larry always said in front of the courthouses after every court session that they had, always said, stop what you're doing. If you see something, say something, right? He would always say that. And I think that alludes to that. I mean, in my opinion, very unprofessional opinion, you knew something funny was going on, but you was doing things different to protect your butt at that time. I think at that time, in my opinion, I think she wanted to cover her ass. So she just wanted to, hey, I got my lawyer on the phone, and I'm concerned now, right? Yeah. Is that how you kind of?
Yeah, it was. But let me say this too, Chuck. When she did come forward, she gave us information we had never heard of. She started talking about the zombie stuff and the dark entities and the spiritual aspect and how Charles was dark and he ended up dying. And so we're getting all this stuff from her on an interview. At that point, I didn't know if she was being truthful, if she wasn't, but a lot of the things she said were truthful. And it brought us, and it kind of confirmed a lot of things that we were thinking. So I'll give her credit to that.
Sure.
But I think she got there because she was forced in that direction.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
I don't think she would have came out and said that if she wasn't forced.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. When the detectives in Gilbert reached out to her, Melanie, and she said her part and said, no, they're not here. They were here. Did that detective have an inkling that something was going on? Like you had the inkling when you guys went to go see Chad and Alex? Or was it just them doing their job, saying, "No, they're not here"?
I don't know. That's a good question. I never really thought about that.
What was the vibes like? What was his temperature? Was he like, "Yo, I think something's going on here. You should look into this"? Or
we really never talked about that. Like the phone call that night was like, "Hey, JJ isn't here. What's your next step?" And so I told him, "Look, we're going to apply for a warrant. We're going to kick the door in the morning. Hopefully, we get the warrant signed by the judge." And we're going to figure out where the kids are at, or JJ was at that time. We didn't know Tylee was missing. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I made a phone call to the prosecutor that night. Hey, JJ isn't there. She hasn't seen him. He's supposed to be up here with Lori. And that next morning, early morning hours, we executed the search warrant at that place.
Lori's place.
Lori's place.
And that's when you guys found nothing. Hangers.
What we found was we found nothing, but we found a lot, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, it told a story, right?
Yeah.
The next, that afternoon, we were talking to Lori. We were talking to Chad. We were talking to Alex. Not even 12 hours later, we're back at the same place. We're inside the house. Everything's in place. There's couches, photos on the wall, food in the pantry, in the fridge. You go upstairs, there's beds, there's furniture.
Can totally tell that people...
Look like people live there, right? But there's nothing in the closet, empty hangers. in every room empty hangers. So these people left in a quick hurry, and so that told a story in itself, that we confront these guys about JJ. Now they're in the wind, not even 12 hours later. So that again was a huge concern.
Wow. So the next morning you said, you earlier said, we'll do what we have to do, kicking doors. Was there doors that had to be kicked in? Did you guys break down that door?
So the warrant we got from the judge was a no-knock warrant.
Yep. Okay.
So we activated the SWAT team. They came out, got the ram, popped the door, went in, cleared the house. We stayed out. We served a search warrant on apartment 175, which was Lori's apartment. 174, which was Melanie Boudreaux's apartment, who was Lori's niece.
Sure.
And then apartment 107, which is where Chad said he last saw JJ.
Got it. And all the apartments look like Lori's?
107 was completely vacant.
Okay.
Not a stitch of furniture, nothing. 174, there were clothes. It looked like somebody still lived there. 175, it looked like somebody lived there and left in a hurry.
Okay. So when you get to Lori's joint, you get there, what is your initial thought? What did you think?
I get there, I look in, I'm walking through. I get the feeling that they left in a hurry based on everything there. And at that point, I'm thinking, what in the hell is going on? Like, why would somebody leave?
This is weird.
Right, why would somebody leave? We're looking for a 7-year-old autistic boy. Why are you taking off? Like, initially, I go into, okay, something's going on. Like anybody would. You're taking off, you're not talking to us, you're lying about where this kid is. You're trying to get friends involved in Arizona. And so when they left, I'm like, okay, now we're going to find out where this kid's at. That was the initial thought in my head. Where's this kid?
So now it became a little bit like we gotta find it, and it always was that. But I think the more and more you search, and the less and less you get, it starts to becoming like a suffocating situation where we gotta find this kid. Like we gotta find him,
brother. And a lot of us are dads, right?
Sure, yeah.
And you put yourself you try not to get personal with cases. You try to leave that stuff at home. But when you're a father and you have a missing child, you put yourself in that situation and you think, what would I want that detective to do if it was my kid?
Right.
Right? So you handle that case in that aspect sometimes. What would I want that detective to do? And that's what I'm going to do.
And that's a great point. And I want to talk about that a little later, which is going to lead to our special guest. But yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, police officers, detectives, FBI, you guys are all made of flesh and bone, just like me. You look like a robot, though. You're a big man, yeah. But you still have flesh and bones. And I would imagine you try to do the best as if it was your situation. You personalize it, but you to a degree, you have to filter that. So that's what makes you a hero, brother. And again, we'll talk about that a little later. But okay, so now when they're not there, they're gone. Where are they at?
So that time, initially, we have no clue.
Okay.
We're sending detectives to neighboring cities, checking hotel parking lots.
And nobody saw a thing?
Nobody saw a thing. We're trying to ping cell phones. Exigent circumstances, we're trying to get a hold of cell phone companies. Hey, I need a ping on this phone. I need a ping on
Were
this.
they using burner phones at the time?
They were at the time. Not that we knew not at that time we didn't know they were doing that. Later on we learned that. But initially we were trying to we just had a couple of specific cell phone numbers for Lori and Chad. And so we would call those numbers and go straight to voicemail. Phones were shut off. So our initial thing was like, we have got to find these guys. And one day turns into 2 days. We're down in neighboring cities, checking hotel parking lots, nothing. And so now my lieutenant at the time calls the FBI and says, hey, you have this missing autistic kid. We don't know if he's in Arizona. We don't know if he's in Idaho, but we need some help because it may go over state lines. And that's when the FBI gets involved.
Got it. And who was the agent on that?
Initially was Ricky Wright. And he stuck with that case for quite a while. There was Ricky Wright and Travis Homer.
Okay. So did the FBI determine that they were in Hawaii?
Nope. So we'll back up a couple weeks. Kids go missing. We get the FBI involvement. Our next course of action is notifying NCMEC, which is an acronym for National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Okay.
We notify NCMEC. They send up some paperwork. We fill out paperwork. We list JJ as a missing child. But in the meantime, we had also learned that his sister Tylee was also missing. And we learned that through talking to family members. When we were trying to find JJ, we're getting a hold of everybody, right? Scrambling, trying to find JJ. Get a hold of the family, and they say, hey, you know what? Come to think of it, we haven't seen Tylee or talked to Tylee for a while, who is JJ's older sister.
Right.
At that point, when we get a hold of NCMEC, we list JJ and Tylee both as missing children. Set up hotlines to try to find them, and through those hotlines and through some cell phone data, we learned they were in Hawaii.
Hawaii. Okay. And you actually brought something today that has never been seen before, which I appreciate. This is a operational, what did you call it earlier?
Just basically an ops plan. Anytime you do like a high risk, potential high risk
Do you mind reaching that for me?
warrant, anything like that, you know, you write it all down, you put the players, photographs.
Brief date was on
You know,
February
you
20th.
have,
So it's just in detail as to what's going to happen down there.
you want to make sure everybody involved is safe.
So it's actually pretty cool. It gives you, it's kind of like a report of what that operation, I'm sure a lot of you know what this is. I don't. I learned today. But you see here we have some familiar photos that we've seen before. We have one of Chad posing like a smart ass there. And then this is just kind of like a map of, I believe, where they might have been or what they, where they've gone. And then we have more maps here. So tell me a little bit about this operation. You were down there day one. I mean, excuse me, when did you get called down there? So, excuse me, before we go, is this here the condo that they were staying at?
Yeah,
So this is the condo they were staying at.
backside.
And I know our buddy Nate Eaton has showed everybody in the world what their condo looks like, but I got a better picture. Look at that. Anyway, that's the back side of it. Was there surveillance happening in the back as well as the front?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, when we were going to serve her with the protection order, yeah, we had surveillance all over.
Cool. So you get there, you immediately hop in a car, and you go surveil.
So we land in Hawaii, in Kauai, and it's weird because everybody, they see our where we're from on the flight tickets.
Sure.
And we get some comments like go get them, because it had already gone public.
So they knew. Okay.
Yeah. So the girls checking us in, the flight attendants, they look at your ticket and they're like, okay, good luck, go get them, because they knew what was going on.
Oh, that's dope. That's cool.
So we get there, rent a car, we go meet at the Kauai Police Department, get a brief on what's going on, introduce ourselves to those detectives, and then we started surveillance immediately.
So when was the tell me the part where they got served papers and they were by a swimming pool hanging out?
So that was while we were there. We were trying to locate Chad and Lori. Those guys ended up locating them at the swimming pool.
Got it. Were you guys able to speak to them?
We never did. No.
Never.
As far as Rexburg.
So was that a jurisdictional thing?
Yeah, I mean, we were there to observe. Right?
Oh,
we're in their backyard.
Okay.
They're doing their thing.
Sure, just pure respect. Hey, you guys do what you got to do.
Do what you do. We'll help with surveillance.
Got it.
We kind of want to be part of it. But yeah,
How were they? Were they cool with you guys?
Absolutely great. Yeah, absolutely. They've been over backwards for us.
That's dope. That's good. That's really good. So you guys were there watching when they got the paper served?
Yeah.
So the guy who was serving the papers, he just seems like, okay, here's the paperwork. You have any questions? And I just remember Chad looking at the paperwork like he's some lawyer, like, looking through it. And she's all, is that it? Is that it? With her little voice,
Yeah.
She goes, is that it? That it? Like, and meanwhile, they already know all of this happened, right? Like, to this day, I don't get it. Like, it's one of those things that I cannot fathom to this day on how people can do such horrible things and live a life like it almost makes me feel like somebody came down to them and said, hey man, you got a pass. Don't worry about all of this. You're going to be good. Go through what you got to go through. You're going to be good at the end. This is that. And that's the frustration, I think, with everybody who's watched court sessions, who's watched some of these podcasts, who's watched the news and seen faces like Lori's face and seen Chad, especially Chad's face at the court. I went to a sentencing and just seeing his face and him just not giving a damn, just like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's so frustrating.
Brother, going back to that, when they served him, if you go back and watch that video, and I've dissected this and I've watched it 10 times, as soon as they serve her, he sits up. He's laying down. He sits up. Yeah. He grabs the paperwork. He starts looking at it. You can see his breathing change. You can see him start taking heavier breaths, right? He's getting nervous. He's flipping over these pages. I guarantee you he's not reading that. He's acting like he's reading it, but I think in his mind he's thinking, "Oh fuck, what's going to happen?"
Right.
And he's just flipping over it. There's no way he's reading it that quick.
No, you're right. Yeah.
So he's grabbing, he's flipping through. You know, he's breathing heavy. He was starting to stress at that point, and that's the first time I saw him start to change behavior and stress out about what's going on.
So, in your opinion, you think that he knew that this was going to be a long journey of being like they were going to sweat him until the very end?
I think so.
Okay, fair enough. But not her. Not her. From start to finish, this woman has always been, like, that's crazy.
Yo,
that's crazy. That's like mob behavior. That's like mafia behavior,
She's, and I've said this from the beginning, she's built for prison. She knows how to handle it. He doesn't.
Speaking of, okay, and we're going to jump a little
I think
bit.
she's more from the streets than he is.
You know what? My wife and I often speak about that. Like, you can just tell who's cut from that cloth and who's not. And it just seems like to me, yeah, you're right. Like, she has that, she has that personality of, you know what? Anyway, so we're going to jump a lot because I don't want this to be, a timeline that we follow. We're not here to follow timelines. We're here to speak about, feelings and things that have happened. Talk to me about it. So do you remember visiting her in a jail one time to serve her with something and something happened at that visit? Do you remember that at all?
We served her when we were in Kauai, we tried to talk to her. She was in the jail getting fingerprinted. She wanted nothing to do with us. The next time I think I served her in the jail was with the indictment for the murder.
Right. What happened in that visit? Was she doing some promiscuous thing?
She had her pants rolled down. She was laughing, flirtatious. She was talking to one of the jailers like a friend almost. But it was odd because, she's getting served with an indictment for murder of her children.
Right.
And she was smiling and joking and trying to make light of it. To me, and she, she comes out, she has those orange jumpsuit rolled down a little bit. Yeah. I just looked at her like, what are you doing? Like, who does that? You're getting served with the indictment of murdering your own children, and that's the reaction.
Yeah.
It's like, so at that point, it was kind of a, I don't want to say a turning point for me, but my empathy for anything probably went out the window that day.
Wow. And it makes sense because you're right. Any person who is in their right senses that gets served with something like that about your own children would probably freak out. I am being accused of killing my children. What?
Brother, and it goes to show, like, what's going on?
Right.
What's going on up here?
Often people have said that she's either checked out mentally, maybe a force of the other side has taken over, and I don't know. But we've had conversations before, and I'm a strong believer of if there's good, there's bad, and if there is a Heavenly Father, or God, then there is the opposite as well. That makes sense to me. I strongly feel that, and let this be a lesson, if we invite these things into our lives,
it's not going to be hard to have somebody answer that, or excuse me, not somebody, but those forces answer that invitation, in my opinion. But anyway,
And I want to say this real quick. Going back to that. Throughout our entire investigation, she was not always like that. We've learned she was a good mom. She put JJ and she put Tylee first in a lot of situations. So everybody we talked to was like, there's no way. There's no way Lori did that. There's no way she's involved with that. There's no way she can do that. She was a great mom. Everybody we talked to, family, friends, church, school teachers, everybody said the same thing. There's no way Lori would have done that. So you have all this background, and all of a sudden she flips. Right? So what's a trigger? Does she meet Chad? Because everything flips as soon as she meets Chad. So when you're going back, I don't want to portray her as completely evil for her entire life. Like, by all accounts, she was a great mom up until a certain point.
thank you for highlighting that. That makes it that you're a fair person. You're not just yes, bad, and yeah, and you're right. You're not the only person who has said that. Her sister Summer had a interview with, I think, Nate Eaton, and she said in that interview, I still love my sister because I had a different sister. I had memories of a good person. I had memories of someone, not this new person. Yeah. So that is very true. You're right. She wasn't always this person. Something, somewhere, somehow clicked, something, right? Like you said, and everything went left. But there's still people that love her that hold on to the good memories, right? And sometimes I feel, and I might be talking out of line here, but sometimes I feel like her son Kobe might be pressured to hating her, right? But I think that a part of him wants to hold on to who he knew, his mother. That's your mom. That's your mother. She was an angel before all of this happened, and it's okay for him to hold on to that and say, no, that's the part I still love, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
and back to that real quick. That's probably the one person I have more empathy for in this entire thing is Colby, because he lost a brother, he lost a sister, he lost a mom, he lost a dad, all in the span of what, 5 months?
5 months.
And that kid is a young kid. He's in his early 21, 22 years old.
Baby, yeah.
And your moms you learn your mom did this to your siblings. And I've had a lot of conversations with Colby, and he says, that's the woman that I'm talking to now is not my mom.
That's what he said, yeah.
Yeah, it's not her.
I like Colby. I actually
good kid.
I didn't meet him, but I had dialogue with him at the courthouse the day of Chad's sentencing. I wanted to hug you. I really did. I wanted to give you a big hug and tell you that I love you. Reach out to me, man. I've DM'd you a couple of times. I'm sure you don't see that. I'd like to talk to you, man. I just want to tell you that from this side of the world, people love you. I think you know that, but I just want to hug you, bro, because I think that you're doing great. You're doing really. There's no manual to what you're going through. It's hard. It really is, and God bless you for being a strong man. But anyway, yeah, good point. He is a good person, absolutely. Let's go. Okay, so take me back to the night before you served Chad with the warrant to go through his property.
Oh man, that was a stressful time. Like, everything has built up. Like, we've exhausted everything, right? We followed the evidence, dead end. We followed the evidence, dead end. We followed the evidence, dead end. We learn about these text messages of Chad sending to his wife. I'm burning limbs. I shot a raccoon. And it's the next day that Tylee. So her last known proof of life is September 8th. These messages are sent September 9th. We have Alex pinged out there September 9th. Coupled with the text messages, we have Alex pinged out there the day after JJ's last known proof of life, which is September 22nd. Alex is out there the morning September 23rd, right? So we have all this stuff, and we're like, man, we need to get on that property. We get a search warrant. We apply for a search warrant. We get it. We have a debrief, a huge debrief the night before we serve that search warrant.
At the police station, you guys have that debrief?
It wasn't at the police station, at our training building.
Okay.
We had several agencies, Attorney General's office, FBI, Rexburg Police, Fremont County. We had surveillance teams from Boise's narcotics unit, undercover guys from different places, and there's probably 50 people in this room, and we're talking about what's going to happen the next morning. And this is months and months of work put into this freaking very time.
And everybody's on edge.
Everybody, it's like, where do we go? If this doesn't work out, where do we go? So that's in the back of your head. And then you're anxious about what's going to happen the next morning. I don't think I got an ounce of sleep the night before.
Wow.
We met with all those guys, and after everybody left, there was me and my Lieutenant Ron Ball sitting there. And we're outside the training building, leaned up against my car, and I'm like, Ron, like, what if these kids aren't here? Like, where do we go? Everything has been exhausted. We have worked tirelessly for, Chuck, months and months. Like,
and let me add to that real quick. I don't know the gist of that, but I can only imagine when he says that we've been working at this months and months tirelessly. These are, the average Joe will go home and say, we're going to have dinner, we're going to go to our son's or daughter's, soccer. You're not doing that.
no.
And let this be known, one thing that you've always been good at is you've never said just me. We know it was not just you. Right. So let that be known. Thank you for always letting us know that. There's a gang of men and women who have put their lives on the back burner to attend to this case. And they put their all to make sure that things are done right. And I think you know by now that we all thank you for that. But when you say that, that's what I think. Like, people need to understand that, baseball games, softball games we weren't going to those. We weren't going to volleyball games. We weren't going to the fair. We were going to knock on doors. We were going to talk to people, right? So one thing pops in my mind. I've always had a question about this. You said that we've worked every lead. We've worked every tips as well. And there's hundreds of them coming in. Right. How does that work? If somebody calls in and says, hey, because I'm sure there's goofballs out there who call just to mess around, right? Bullshit, and say, I think I saw, JJ, yeah. Or so. Do those people have consequences for slowing up?
No, we didn't have time for that, man. It was. We get a tip, we assign an officer to that tip. So that let's say, just for conversation's sake, this is tip number 10. All right, okay. We assigned an officer. You have tip number 10. You go follow up with this tip. So they would leave a callback number. We call that number back. Hey, tell us about what you saw or what you think you saw. We would follow that. Oh, I saw Tylee at a grocery store in Evansville, Indiana.
And you would get shit like that.
Yeah. Wow. So okay. So now I have to call Evansville. Now I have to call that grocery store. Hey, you mind if I get some surveillance footage?
And that's time.
That's time. That takes. There was hundreds of that. Sometimes we wouldn't get a callback number, so it's easy just to check off.
Sure.
But those type of tips, we would view the surveillance. No, that's not Tylee. Appreciate your tips, not Tylee. Check it off. Write a brief little summary. File it away. Go to the next tip. And hundreds of tips.
Work is being done, and I've never been put in this situation, and I hope to God that I don't. But for those of you who've been through something like this before, understand that when there's time going on and there's no results, it ain't cops just chilling. It's law enforcement attending to these tips to help your situation. I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah, and not all the time can we address that with the public, right? We can't say what we're doing to keep the integrity of the investigation.
Sure.
We can't always be completely forthcoming. And just know, yeah, absolutely. There's things going on behind the scenes nonstop. I mean, it's like a duck paddling, right? Everything's calm on the surface, but underneath those legs are just kicking.
That's right.
Turning. That's how it was.
All right, so bring me back to that night again. So
So we're sitting there, and Ron and I are outside. I'm like, man, what if these kids aren't here? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know where we go. And I just remember sitting there just talking and just exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. I'm anxious, I'm nervous. You know, you get emotional because these are two beautiful kids that have gone missing. And we sat there, and not a lot of words were spoken. We just kind of were sitting there together. And he says, "Well, we'll figure it out in the morning." And we broke, and he went home. I went home. I don't think I got an ounce of sleep that night. And then early morning, we were at Chad Daybell's house, 7:00 in the morning, knocking on the door.
So what does an evening like this look like for you? You get home, you don't have an ounce of sleep. Your family is ready to greet you. They're ready for you to play dad and husband. But here you carry this burden and this weight of something that's going to go down. That's a very important piece to this case. Potentially something good or something bad can happen. Where's your mind when you get home?
I'll tell you what it should have been. It should have been on my family. You know, that's a huge regret for me. Is I don't think that during that time, like, I balanced. I got 2 kids. I got a wife. They have sports going on, and you know, I sometimes am beating myself up over not being there mentally and emotionally for those guys, but I have this going on too, right? And so, am I there? I don't know. That's a question for my wife and kids. I think I'm there. You know, I think I'm present, but you know, I was probably scatterbrained. I was probably
Trying to
there
do the best
physically, but not emotionally.
Trying to do the best you can, brother. God bless you for that. I can't imagine. And you know what? That just goes to show your dedication to somebody else's life. Because a lot of people just put on the uniform, carry the badge, and you know, they do their job and treat it as a job. But the fact that you treated it like it was your own speaks a lot, and it speaks volumes. Anyway, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So, okay, so you broke, you go home for the night, you don't sleep, you wake up the next morning, you go to the drawing board, or everything's already planned, right? You go to, what do you do? What happens?
Brother, we meet at the. I'll remember this like it was yesterday. We meet at the police department early morning.
Okay.
Get vested up. You don't know what you're walking into.
Sure.
We have the cavalry waiting. We have 50 plus undercover vehicles, patrol cars. Big Blue is what we called it, the FBI huge command center van. And we caravan out to the church, which is a couple miles south.
Sure, yeah.
The
Been there
Daybell
before.
residence.
Yep.
And everybody else pulls into the church, and 4 of us just continue on to Chad's house, 4 or 5. And there's probably 5 of us that pull up and knock on the front door. Everybody else is staged at the church, waiting for our okay that the scene's secure and safe for them to roll up. But I remember thinking, driving out there, like, this is it. Like, my mind was going 1,000 miles an hour driving out there, and it's a couple mile drive, so I had about 10 minutes to kind of think about things. And I see everybody in my rearview mirror. I see people in front of me, and I see people pull off, and we continue on. And I'm thinking, come on, this has got to be it. Like,
and you got adrenaline going?
Of course, yeah, adrenaline, anxiety.
Can you imagine? Not that anybody was, but I put myself in that situation. If I'm in that house and I'm looking out the window and I see unmarked vehicles and they're coming to my, holy shit. Something's going down.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how that person would feel, but those guys were either sleeping or doing something. And anyway, so you get there.
So we roll up, and as we roll up, we had already talked about blocking roads off in every direction. So as we go through an intersection, there's patrolmen already sitting there, come up right behind us, put their lights on, they block that intersection. So everything now, we're squared away, everything is shut off, right? So we roll up, knock on the door. Chad's son, Mark, answers, eating a bowl of cereal. 7 something.
What kind of cereal was it? Do you know?
I don't even know.
All right, who cares? Doesn't matter.
7-something in the morning, he answers the door, bowl of cereal in his hand.
And is he eating it as he's talking to you?
He has a spoon in his hand, yeah, and he's just sitting there. And we say, hey, we're here. Is your dad home? Yeah, he's home. He's upstairs asleep. All right, we have this warrant. We need to talk to him. Mark lets us in the house. We follow Mark. Mark points us upstairs. He's up here. We walk up these little stairs. There's a little loft, and Chad's asleep in the bed.
So you said Mark pointed where?
Upstairs.
You heard that, John Pryor? You dumbass. There is a second floor, man. You've been confusing people, man. Anyway, so he points upstairs, and so you go upstairs.
Go upstairs, Ron.
Nobody tips him off. Nobody says, okay.
He's asleep.
So are you guys at this time saying, okay, everybody sit down, show me your hands? Or
So as we go upstairs, there's 2 or 3 of us that go upstairs,
right.
Me being one of them. A couple of them stay there downstairs with the rest of the kids. They say, hey, you guys got to hang out here for a minute.
Were they all there? Was Emma there too?
You know what, Chuck? I don't remember who was there.
Okay, no problem.
I just remember Mark. No, Emma wasn't there. She lived across the street.
Got it. Okay.
So there was Mark, probably Seth, his wife. I think that was it.
Okay. All right. And
Garth maybe.
Garth, and you guys are there telling them, hey, be cool. We're just gonna go do our job. Did any of the detectives or the cops that were downstairs say anything about their behavior? Did anybody look like they were nervous? Or?
No. And here's those kids. I got mixed feelings on that, but they've been through a lot, right? So they kind of just sat there. They sat there like,
They just look oblivious to me, man.
Dude,
No disrespect, but
they're going through it. They sat there. There was never any really disrespect. They never really talked to us ever. But I don't think they really never disrespected us there at the scene either.
Got it. So you get upstairs. Is there a door?
If there is, it's open. I don't remember if there's a door.
Sure. So you get up there, and it was his room where he was sleeping.
Up in the loft.
Did it smell bad up there? How did it? Did it smell like socks? I mean, what?
It was a cluttered room.
Did he just have shit everywhere? I mean,
yeah, any
pictures of Lori?
No, he had a mattress on the floor that he was sleeping on. There was his own books. It looked like he had been reading on the floor. Some cords for cell phones, computers, and yeah, he was asleep.
He was. So how'd you wake Chappie up? I mean, that was great.
So Ron said, "Hey, Chad, you need to wake up.
Did
we
he
have a
poke him?
warrant."
Did he
No, we just announced ourselves, and he
woke up.
He kind of woke up.
Wow. Okay.
He was in his garments.
Oh, okay. Did he cover himself immediately?
No. Sat up and just said, "Okay, you mind if I get dressed?" We're like, "Yeah, put some clothes on. Come downstairs." And so we sat there while he put clothes on.
And not that he would, because we know he's not. He's not like that. He's a gerbil, right? So he wouldn't go reach for a gun. But you guys are planning that, right? In your head, you guys are thinking anything could happen.
Yeah,
so
brother,
we got to be ready.
Yeah, you don't know what's going on. You don't know if you've got this guy cornered, what he's going to do.
Exactly.
So we're vested up. You're prepared at that point mentally. You're prepared.
Is your hand
for
right
anything.
here?
No.
Okay. All right.
No. If he had made some movements, maybe, but no, it was.
You guys
you're
just
mentally
knew.
prepared.
Yeah, you guys just knew. We are talking to a dumbass. This guy ain't doing nothing. He's a feather.
Well, I wouldn't even say that either, Chuck, because you never know what people are capable of.
Absolutely.
You never know. And I didn't know him from, he had never spoken to us, except for that time back in November is the only words he ever spoke to me. Every other time he refused. So I didn't know what Chad Daybell was capable of at that point.
Got it.
So yeah, we were prepared for anything.
So he gets dressed.
Then
he gets the paper.
Then he walks downstairs, gets the paper. He sits at the kitchen table.
Okay, so sorry, I got to see this. I'm a step-by-step kind of fellow here. So he gets he gets dressed. You guys are watching him. Is he then sandwiched where the first detective goes downstairs, then he's in the middle, and then you guys go behind him?
We're behind him. We let him walk first. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That was probably obvious for some of you. I can't see that. I know someone has to be behind him, though, because he can't be behind the both of you.
Yeah.
So I get that part.
We don't want him behind any officer just for officer safety reasons. You don't want him grabbing a gun or whatever.
Got it. So he walks down.
He walks down. He sits down at the kitchen table.
Hair's all messed up.
Hair messed up. Bedhead.
Okay.
Just woke up. Soft spoken at that point.
Whatever. He's always soft, but whatever. Okay, so you walk him downstairs.
Walk him downstairs. He sits down. Hey, Chad, we have a warrant for the property to search the property inside and outside.
Does he say at that point, "Oh, we're just hanging out"?
No, he says, "Can I call my attorney?" Absolutely, call your attorney.
Did he read it, or did he just flat out say, "Can I call my
I
attorney?"
want to call my attorney.
Okay.
So
All
he
right.
calls his attorney, puts his attorney on speakerphone.
Prior.
Nope. Mark Means.
Means. Got it. Okay.
Puts his attorney on speakerphone. He starts talking, and my lieutenant's like, "Chad, does he know he's on speakerphone? Like, this is a conversation probably that needs to be confidential."
Oh, you guys are still helping this guy out to some degree.
Brother, we want to do it by the book.
Got it. Okay.
Right? I mean, when it comes to 2 missing kids,
Yeah,
you
sure.
want to do
Got it.
everything. So he says, "This is probably a conversation that we don't need to be hearing. Let him know he's on speakerphone." So Chad says, "Hey, by the way, you're on speakerphone." Well, take me off speakerphone, right? So he takes him off, and he's talking to him, and he's flipping through the warrant, kind of reading him what it says. Gets off the phone with his attorney, goes into the front room, sits down in the recliner. And
Does he recline back?
Nope, doesn't kick it out.
All right.
He's reading it. And I remember telling Ron the night before, "Brother, we're going to know real quick whether those kids are there or not." You know, we've put a lot of time and emotion in this case, and I remember telling Ron, like, when he reads that warrant, he reads everything involved, we're going to see some type of change of behavior. And he sits in that recliner, and he picks up the warrant, and he's reading it, and I remember just watching, like, I'm going to see something, and I don't see anything. And he's going through it, and he's kind of chuckling to himself. And I'm looking for carotid artery, right? I'm looking for something, sweating. He's getting anxious, sitting in the chair, having to stand up, something to show me these kids are here. Show me these kids are here. And there's nothing. And I remember thinking to myself, fuck, we're in the wrong place. There's nothing here. And I remember sitting there in the living room, discouraged, just sitting there staring at him, thinking, where the hell are these kids at? And he's reading it, and his kids are asking, you know, can we stay here? Do we have to leave? I'm like, no, you can stay here, but you're going to be escorted by a cop just for our safety. And he's asking the same thing. And he's going through it, kind of chuckles, and he's joking with his kids. He says, yeah, can I go out and make a couple phone calls? Do what you got to do.
Chad is asking if he can make phone calls. Mm-hmm. Do you know who he's calling at that time?
No clue.
Nobody knows who he's calling?
Nope.
Really?
Nope. Yeah.
At that point, was his privacy being respected? Is it something that had to be done? I mean...
Yeah, at that point, we're just letting them know we own this property right now. This is our property. We're going to do whatever we need to do. You can stay here if you want, but if you do, you're going to be escorted around. But at this point, like, you have no say on what happens. So if you want to stay, great. And he's like, okay, can I go make a few phone calls outside? Yeah, go ahead. And while he's doing that, we have other people in the backyard doing stuff, setting up perimeters, running dogs. And at that point, he's just a spectator at his own property.
So the phone calls that he made, was there 2 calls?
I don't know how many phone calls he made, because he ended up going into his vehicle that was parked in the driveway on the east side of the house, or excuse me, west side of the house. And so he's sitting in his car on the phone.
How long was the conversation? Did he actually connect with somebody? Can you guys tell that if he connected with somebody?
He was talking to somebody. Yeah, you can tell he was talking to somebody.
Wouldn't be a phone call to Lori, because you guys would have known that, because those get recorded, right?
Eventually they had talked. I didn't know what was going on right then, But eventually they had talked that morning, yeah.
So before we go any further, I want to point something out. So there's a difference between the cop or detective who goes there and says, we may find something, we may not. All right, we'll just check that off and move on. And the detective or the officer that says, I'm going to know if something is here or not by any sort of behavior, movement, whatever the case is. And to feel defeated at the time that you could not find any sort of something to tell you, oh, he's nervous, they're here. You saw the opposite and you felt defeated. And I can see that the emotions got the best of you. Do you now understand why a lot of us love you? We love everybody who put the time and effort. But, brother, we love you because of that. I know that there's a lot that's being kept in here, and it's all great. There's a time and a place for that. But for you to show a little piece of that on this platform shows me and everybody that you were in this because you love them kids, whether you knew them or not. And I want to thank you for that. We all want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And we will talk about that a little bit further down. But now you guys start setting up positions, setting up the tents. I assume the tents to start digging and start looking, correct?
Yeah, so, I'm sitting out there with Chad and watching him kind of talk on the phone, and everybody has their assignments, right? And so we're running cadaver dogs through the backyard. My initial assignment was to watch Chad for a minute while he's on the phone call. They're doing the preliminary stuff before we even go out there.
Sure.
So they're doing that. I'm watching Chad on this call. and I start watching him, and as I'm watching, in my head, there's 1,000 things going on. Like, where do we go from here? I'm defeated, like you said. I'm just pissed off. I'm angry. And it's like all these months of time and effort for nothing. That's what I'm thinking, right? And then I start to see Chad on this phone call, and he's facing west, and he's got the phone in his right hand, and he keeps looking over his right shoulder, and he's doing it so much that it catches my attention. I'm standing in the front lawn area. I'm like, what the hell is he looking at? And so I maneuver myself over to get his line of sight, and I see he's looking straight directly towards this big tree in a pond area. And there's some detectives, there's some FBI agents over in that area. And so he's looking, and he's on the phone, looking over his right shoulder a bunch of times. He ends that phone call, he gets out of the car, stands at the back of the car as he has a hat on. Takes his hat off, he's running his fingers through his hair, puts his hat on, he's looking down, looks back up, he's watching these guys over at this tree, puts his hat down again, he's looking down. I'm thinking, and at that point I'm like, wait a minute, maybe we are at the right spot. Like, that was the first glimmer of hope.
Wow.
Was maybe we are at the right spot. And he just kept watching. And that was the first actual nervous change of behavior that I saw in him. But it wasn't in front of his kids. It wasn't sitting in the recliner. It was right then when he actually saw people in the vicinity. And later that ended up where we found JJ.
Good for you, brother. You stayed on it. You stayed on it. You felt defeated, but you were not defeated. Let me get you right real quick. Yeah, good for you, because it's so easy to just say, and then just that. But you caught on to that, and that kind of turned up the heat a little bit to say, hey, we might be in the right spot. I just kind of saw something that makes me feel like he's worried about something back there, right?
So I told Ron, my lieutenant, I'm like, come over here, watch him for a minute. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't just seeing things,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So Ron's standing next to me, and we're in the front lawn, and he's watching. He's like, man, he is into something. And I'm like, I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, what's over there? And so as he's looking and looking, thank you. We get Detective Wheeler. And we're like, okay, we're going to start in the backyard now. So my assignment now is in the backyard. We're like, watch him. Position your car, back up, put your dash cam on him, and push record, and you watch his behavior. And so we assigned that to Eric Wheeler, who was a patrol sergeant at the time. And at that time, we went in the backyard, and Eric stood out there. But it was the same thing for him. He noticed the exact same thing. So you have 3 seasoned officers noticing the same thing. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, there's got to be something here. And so we started out there digging, and yeah, man, we went to the backyard and all hands on deck, and we just started.
Digging. And to kind of speed things up a little bit, the first sign of hope was digging by that tree and seeing that there were some boards on the surface, correct?
So I'm digging in the backyard. I'm sifting through our initial assignments, sifting through a fire pit area, and we're digging buckets of shoveling dirt into buckets, sifting through, and all of a sudden somebody yells, "Hey, everybody, come over here!" And so I go over there.
So how does that sound? Like, hey, I found something. Come here. I mean,
well, somebody had told me, and I don't remember who, but they're like, "You got to see this. Come over here." Okay. And so I walked over there, and then once a couple of us migrated over there, word spread pretty quick on the property that something.
And it sucks because it's like good news, but it's bad news, right? I mean,
yeah, and I didn't know what was going on. Like, I didn't know what we had at that point.
Sure, okay.
And so we start taking back some soil, and I'm watching these FBI guys, the forensic team, work. And by the way, those guys are freaking awesome. Like, I can't give enough kudos to those guys. And they take off the topsoil, and instantly, like as a cop, as anybody's been in law enforcement, you smell, unfortunately, throughout your career, decomposing bodies, various states of decomposing bodies, whether it's a suicide, a homicide.
Sure. They've
been dead a week, a month, different degrees of heat. And so I recognize the smell right away. And I'm thinking, man, is this really happening? Is this really happening? And so you're watching, and your mind is racing, and you're just caught up in everything. And they take off the soil, and it exposes there's 3 or 4 white rocks. And initially you're like, okay, there's something under there. Obviously there's something under there because it's not natural. You start to look at these roots that are cut. They take off the white rocks, and there's some plywood, pieces of thin plywood board. They take off the board, and then you can see the soil change from dry soil to wet. And these guys are on their hands and knees, kind of brushing stuff away with like, it looked like paintbrushes at that point. And we're sitting there, and there's a group around us, and I remember looking at my lieutenant and just staring, and thinking, man, I hope this is one of them, but you don't, And really nobody was saying a word. It was quiet, and everybody kind of knew what was going on, and nothing needed to be said. Everybody kind of felt the same thing. And they start brushing this away, and it exposes this black plastic, and it's round. The shape is round, and it looks like the crown of a head. And at that point, everybody's kind of looking at each other. Nothing's being said. It's dead quiet. You got 30 guys sitting there, and they're exposing this, and they're brushing it away, and all of a sudden it exposes a round object, black plastic, and one of the FBI guys cuts into it with this small, sharp instrument, makes a slit in the plastic. You open it up, and it's more white plastic. So they make a slit again, open it up, and it's what looks like brown human hair. And we knew JJ's hairstyle was kind of longer. You know, we knew the shape of his head. Brother, I had looked at hundreds of videos and pictures. I could tell you that boy from anything. So initially when they cut in, we're like, that's JJ. Everybody knew it was JJ. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of time to process that because at the same time we're doing that, we get word over the radio that Chad Daybell was at his daughter's residence across the street, and now he's leaving at a high rate of speed.
Let me stop you there real quick because I want to talk about this. Let's speculate a little bit. Let's have fun with this because no one really knows where he was going. Where do you think he was going?
You know, I don't know. I've often wondered that. Initially, I thought he was fleeing. He was leaving. It was
he
quick.
was driving pretty fast.
Brother, he was driving quick.
I guess you can't say he was fleeing.
You know, he had a backpack in the passenger seat on the floorboard full of bananas.
Okay.
Some food, some snacks. So wherever he was going, he was planning to be gone for a little while, hours maybe.
So no one stopped when they pulled him. No one said, "Where are you going?" or "What's going on?"
No, I don't think they did. I think they just when they stopped him, they're like, you know what, you're under arrest at this point.
Okay, let's unload real quick. Your feelings. Give it to us raw. None of this. Well, I want to hear it right now. You saw the hair, like you said earlier. You have identified him already because of hours of videos. Now you know it's him, and he's in Chad's property. Talk to me.
At that point, I would probably say I was angry.
Thank you.
Pissed off.
Okay.
Relieved. Confused. Probably every emotion that you can go through, I went through at that point, like instant. You know, you're pissed off that somebody does this to an autistic little 7-year-old boy. You're confused on why they're doing it, what took place. You feel bad for what that little boy went through. You're wondering what to do now. Like he's fleeing. You have all these things going on, just a flood of emotion.
Yeah.
Once we get him stopped, he's put in the handcuffs. It wasn't until that point that the emotions really started to fly. Like, that's when I broke down.
So when he was put in handcuffs, did he say or did he ask, why am I being arrested?
Not that I remember. I wasn't there right when he was put in handcuffs.
Well, I'll tell you what, he didn't. That part we know is that he never once said, why am I being arrested? Dumbass. That's the first tip that you probably led. You get arrested, you ask, why am I being arrested? I think he even says, I may not be coming back. I mean, these are things that, you know, obviously, whatever. Okay, so these emotions are now fleeing, are you know, and go ahead, what were you saying?
Just a flood of emotion. So once we get him in handcuffs, he's in the back of the car. You're relieved that you've been working this case from November 1st, and it's now June 9th. So 6-8 months of nothing but putting your blood, sweat, and tears into this case, long hours, neglecting your own family sometimes.
And I believe that. I believe that. As I sit here today, I believe it. Because when you're watching it from a different state, from a different home, it's just policemen doing their job. I believe it. I believe it 1,000%. Blood, sweat, and tears. 1,000%.
So once he was put in handcuffed and JJ was found, it was a sense of relief. And I remember just driving back from where he was arrested back to JJ, and just a flood of emotion, like finally, like we found him. We wanted to find him alive, right?
Sure.
But we finally found JJ, and it was like it was just relief and happiness and anxiety and anger, and you just didn't know what to feel. And then you had to, brother, this is the hardest part of the job. You feel that, you're feeling it, you're getting emotional, and you have to bury that. You have to stop, turn off everything, and then you go back and you start digging.
Yeah.
And you get him out of the ground. And we got JJ out, and you know, it was a team effort. We got him out of the ground, put him back in the coroner's vehicle, drove him to the morgue.
Did you go?
Followed, yeah.
You followed. Okay.
Followed.
While they were still looking for Tylee. Okay. So on the way to the morgue, Chad is arrested and he's being shipped off, like he's being transported at that time, maybe, or is he still talking to?
Chad's back at the residence. He was allowed to have a conversation with his daughter Emma.
Well, we've all seen that video, yeah.
So has a conversation with his daughter. They talk about finances and different stupid crap, and then he's shipped off to Fremont County Jail. We're continuing to dig with JJ. We get him out of the ground, and he's driven to the morgue.
And you get there, you follow.
We get there, we take him out of the morgue, put him in the cooler.
Have to take pictures.
At that point, we didn't take too many pictures. We did on scene, but we locked it all up for evidence purposes because we were going to go for an autopsy.
Right.
So nothing was manipulated, nothing was touched or changed. We just locked them up at that point in the morgue in the cooler, and then we went back and driving back, and Ron's in my passenger seat. It's a 10-minute drive, nothing but silence.
Any tears? Any?
Not at that point. I think we were just numb.
Got it. Yeah.
And so, you know, I remember there was a song playing. It was called, is it Roses? That was playing. I'll never forget it. I got to look, but it was a song playing, and every time I hear it, it takes me right back to driving back to Chad's place. But yeah, we drove back, and there was really nothing said. He was looking out the passenger window. I was looking out the driver's window, and we were just, I mean, for lack of better terms, just numb, just driving back out there. And you got out and you went back to looking for Tylee.
How long? What was the time span from JJ to Tylee? How long after was she discovered?
You know, my perception of time probably is inaccurate just because with the emotion involved, but I think we found JJ around 9:30, 10, and we started with Tylee probably. Once we found JJ, it took a couple hours to get him out of the ground correctly. I'd say probably 30, 40 minutes, because once we got him out, we already had pings on where we wanted to start. So we started there.
That must have been rough as well, I would imagine. None of this was easy. You know, Ray, I got to tell you, this is, you know, just sitting here and talking to you brings me to the time that all of this happened. I got turned on to this case, so my wife followed this case very closely. I didn't know really too much of the details of the case. I just knew that there were two children involved. I guess just like everybody in the world, right? They knew that there was a boy, then there was a girl involved. I have a son who's autistic. Sweet boy, I love him to death. And when I knew and I found out on the news that the boy was autistic, he had a little similarity to my son. And from that moment on, my heart just bled. And it was just like, wow. And the first thing I thought to myself was, I have to meet Larry and Kay. I have to give them a hug because I was hurting for them. That's what got me onto this case. And it's hard for everybody because no one ever wants to see anybody go through something like this. But children, you know, you can't mess with God's children. They're off limits, you know? And the fact that they died for the cause that they died for, unacceptable. Super unacceptable. And I'll be honest, it's hard till this day to try to wrap my brain around all of this. This story is bizarre. This story is crazy. This story is, it's still, to anybody who doesn't know about it, you can't explain it to them. I mean, how do you, for someone who says to you, hey, so what happened? Tell me about that story. I've tried. Well, these people are just nuts, and you can't explain it. Well, this person did this, and then there was this guy named Alex, and then there, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, yeah.
It's just so hard to explain. So I can't imagine the department or yourself just trying to make sense of all of this. And you guys had to. You guys had to make sense of all of this, put everything together. Anything, you told me that you kept some notes throughout the course of this case to a certain point. Anything that stands out to you? Things that you maybe...
there was a couple interesting things that happened, like, being in Kauai, and at that point, everybody kind of knows Lori and Chad are there, right? And Dateline's already on the island.
Sure.
And they're trying to find Lori and Chad, and we're trying to find Lori and Chad. And there's one road, a main road in Kauai, and everybody travels that too. Like, it's not like there's side roads, right?
Right.
You got the ocean on one side and jungle on the other side. So everybody's on the same road. Well, we ended up running into Keith Morrison, who was trying to do his story.
Shout out to Keith Morrison.
Right, Keith Morrison. And, we pulled over and talked to Keith at a gas station. We're like, you guys are drawing attention. Like, we know what you're trying to do. We appreciate it. But you guys got to kind of tail back.
Fall back.
And Keith was great. He's like, I completely understand. We don't want to get in the way of what you guys need to do. He was great to work with, and that was my first time meeting him. But as we were talking to him, people started recognizing who he was, so we had to hurry up.
Did you take a selfie with him?
No, I didn't. I should have. Maybe one day, Keith. Maybe one day. But yeah, he was kind of cool to meet, and just what really stuck out to me was everybody was so invested in this case with these kids.
Although not just Kauai, everywhere. Like
everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody it seemed like they had stake in this game,
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of interesting, different little tidbits of stuff that happened. I remember one time on Kauai where, we were doing surveillance on Chad and Lori, and we had just served them with a warrant. And so we're still doing surveillance after that. And they go to the beach early morning hours before sunset. And we get word that they're on the beach. And so we have surveillance teams kind of walking around. And there's a couple of FBI agents walking down the sand. And at that point, we didn't know what was going on as far as how people died, what they died from. And so, you're thinking poison, you're thinking all sorts of stuff. Anyway, so they're on the beach and they're laying there and they're not moving. And this goes on for hours. And we're thinking, shit, did they take something and just go watch the sunset and drift off and die? And they're laying
Chad
there.
and Lori.
Okay. And they're not moving. And, we come together and we're like, man, how do you go up and see if they're breathing without blowing your cover, right?
Right.
And so we're trying to concoct this plan together to get up close to them, and there's no way me or Rob or Ron can go because they're going to recognize us. So we were talking about these FBI agents from Honolulu getting close to them. And so they were about ready to get up there, and all of a sudden one of them kind of rolled over, and they ended up just getting up early and falling asleep. But it's things like that where you didn't know the emotional roller coaster,
Sure,
Chuck.
yeah, the unknown, right.
From day one,
Yeah.
everything was up and down, up and down, up and down. So, just little things like that really nobody knows that I kept notes on. And there's some others I'll save for another time. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to say the least, for sure.
You know what? As I sit here, I think, man, this case is super huge. There's so much to cover. We probably covered 3% of it. I think, depending on how it turns out, it wouldn't be no harm in a part 2, I think, right? I think that would be dope. Maybe get into the details of some other things, right? I want to go over a couple of questions, but I think we're going to play the game of speculation because I really want to get your feelings on this, and I want your true heart on this. I want you to really peel back, and I want you to really give me your thoughts. And this is not, I don't want nobody to run with this. This is not Ray Hermosillo saying this is what happened. This is Ray Hermosillo saying, you want to know what I think as a human being? X, Y, Z. Alex, man, and this is a popular question. We should put it on a T-shirt. How do you think the brother died, man? How do you think that man died? Because I got to tell you, it doesn't line up for me, man. Natural causes, for me, no.
So I'm gonna give you my honest opinion.
Okay.
When I first heard about it, I'm like, there's no way. There's no way somebody killed him. He killed himself. There's no way this happened the day after Tammy gets exhumed, right? Being in law enforcement 24 years, there's a thing called coincidence, and then there's there's no way that's going to happen. Fast forward till I get his Google searches back on a warrant, and I go back to when Alex died, and I'm searching Google searches that he did, and he's Googling symptoms. Shortness of breath. Why do I have shortness of breath? Or why am I tired? Why am I dizzy? And Googling symptoms a week before he passed. My initial thought back then was, there's no way this isn't a natural death. But now looking at everything, I don't know if it's divine intervention, but I know Maricopa County did a thorough job in his autopsy, testing for all sorts of stuff because they knew what was going on. So they're testing the results coupled with his Google searches. I think Alex either died of stress, and I know it was blood clots that they claimed that he died from. I don't know if the blood clots were from stress or divine intervention, or if Alex was one of the first victims of COVID, because that was coming out pretty quick. But I don't think anything, in my heart of hearts, I don't think anything foul was going on.
Damn. All right. Fair enough. I mean, I was hoping you'd say something like, Chad crept up in there and did some funny shit.
We knew Chad and Lori in Hawaii at that time.
Got it. Okay. All right.
So the only other person is Zulema, which is his wife. And I've talked in depth with her a lot of times. And
she looked like she would flip on herself, though, huh? If she would have done something, huh?
Yeah, I don't think she did.
Got
anything.
it. Okay. All right.
But, him Googling that stuff and everything else going on.
But talk to me. You said he Googled that. What else did he Google?
There was a lot of different pornography searches, tranny stuff, weird sexual stuff.
Transgender. Okay.
Yeah. Right. I don't know what he was into. I don't know if he had a pornography problem and it kind of escalated into that.
Sure.
Or if he was bisexual.
Hey, to each his own.
At that point, it has nothing to do with the case, right?
But that's what he was looking at.
That's what he was looking at, yeah. And so we weren't really focused on that. We were more focused on what he was Googling as far as, the kids and Tammy were concerned.
Okay, so how do you think, in your hearts of hearts, right? How do you think Tammy was killed?
Speculation.
1,000%. For those of you who missed this part and just are tuning in, we are speculating.
The common theme of this whole thing was asphyxiation.
Yep,
right?
Heard it over and over, yeah.
And so the ME kind of stated that's what Tammy died from, was asphyxiation. Same with JJ. So I can only speculate I don't know how she was asphyxiated, whether it was with a pillow or a bag or but that's what he called.
So what do you see happening though? Like, do you see?
I don't know. I mean, it could. Your mind can go anywhere. Like,
Where does that mind take you?
you don't want to follow that mind. I don't know, man. I don't know I don't know how.
Okay, fair enough. But do you have a certain way in your head? Do you have a certain way?
I think it's pretty probable that it was either a bag or something of that nature that she was asphyxiated with.
So Chad is a chicken shit. So he wouldn't be in the room when that happened, if it happened, right? You think he'd had the kajimbis to be down there watching the whole thing or even holding her down? I don't think so.
I don't think Chad has it in him. I think Chad's kind of a pansy when it comes to that type of stuff. I think Alex probably did. And again, this is just me speculating. My theory, that Alex did the deed and Chad was there to assist him in any way, but I don't think he was there participating actually, with asphyxiating Tammy.
Do you think any of the Daybell children knew any detail of any of this? I personally think, who cares what I think, so we'll run with this. This is just my unprofessional opinion. I think I have a feeling that Emma knew something.
Chuck, the original statement from Garth Daybell to his best friend, was that he came home, found his mom dead, and his dad wasn't home. And so it later morphed into, I came home, my mom and dad were asleep, I heard a thud, and my dad yelled for me to come in. So you look at that and is that the truth, right? Is that the first story the truth, and then he retracts? On the 911 call, Chad's quick to grab that phone from Garth and start talking to the operator. So if you're asking my speculation, my honest opinion, I think Garth knows more than what he's saying.
Agreed. I definitely agree. And let that haunt you for the rest of your life, because you were a part of it. Good, bad, or indifferent, you were a part of it. And again, right, Larry, you see something, you say something, right? I agree. I agree with that.
I feel bad for Tammy. She, of course, there was nobody there really from her kids.
Her family flipped on her.
That had her back, right?
Father killed her. Kids would not. I mean, this is just crazy. And you know what? To that side of the family, my heart goes out to you guys. I met some of you guys at the sentencing for Chad. You guys are beautiful people. Beautiful people. Good, honest, sincere, beautiful people. Good people. I can only imagine that that's who that person was as well.
Tammy's family, yeah, her aunts, her brothers, parents. I mean,
Michael Douglas, was it? Is he?
Yeah.
I only remember that because of the actor's name. You made me cry. That wasn't fair, man. But yeah, he made me cry in court, big time.
Awesome people, and I feel bad for what they had to go through. I was way disappointed in kind of how her kids kind of flipped on her, and really they didn't have her back on anything. And I used to have empathy, and I used to feel sorry for those kids. But brother, at some point, like whether you're manipulated as a child or brainwashed, at some point you have to accept responsibility for what you believe and what you do, right? And if Chad was manipulating or brainwashing those guys, like at some point that's your mother.
Mother, absolutely.
That is your mother.
Mom, yeah.
And to sit here and bash about how lazy she was and how
they all joined in that.
It was disgusting.
Publicly.
It was disgusting.
Publicly. Shame on you. But you know what? Karma is a B word, and anyway, whatever. Do you think, does anyone know if Emma talks to Lori?
I in all honesty, once this trial was done, I tried to forget about it.
Good for you.
I had to for my mental health.
Good for you. No, good for you. But have you heard word? Like, have any whispers? Do you think that? I don't know. I try to picture that sometimes if she's gonna be the umbilical cord for Chad and Lori. Like, hey, by the way, I spoke to my dad. La 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 la. Because they can't speak, right? Lori and Chad can't speak.
They probably could.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, so Chad's on death row, he has to get that accepted, but they're both adjudicated now. It's both gone through the system, right? So I don't know how the IDOC works as far as what they allow, but there's no pending charges, so I don't know why they wouldn't be able to speak.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. You know, and we can keep going on and on and on. You know, with a lot of questions that we have. Do you think that there's still like a following? Do you think that there's like a group of individuals who believe in what Chad was saying that could potentially? I don't think that something like this. Well, I don't know. This world is crazy, but do you think that there's a small following somewhere of individuals like, man, our leader went down. I believe in this, but we got to be, different or tactical about it now?
No. I think Chad had he tried to get a little harem of people started, of women, and that harem was small.
Got
right?
it, okay.
And so those people were exposed in the court process, and I think they've realized that they've been fooled and manipulated. His little cult that he tried to start, his harem, I think was completely abolished, and I don't think there's anybody really. And if they do, they're not going to admit it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Well, you know what? One of the biggest questions that a lot of people have, right, is, Detective Hermosillo, not just you, but these other men and women, how do you do it? You know, it's easy to pull somebody over, give them my citation, and go home and play dad. And then there's a different, on the other side of the coin, it's how do you deal with the stuff that you deal with and go home? We talked about it earlier. How do you go home and play dad or play husband? How do you do it? That's what people ask. And you answered a little bit of it, and you said, well, I don't know if I did do it. And as promised, we have a special guest today. We've never seen this before, and to me, it's been a privilege and an honor, simply because these are good people that we're meeting. We're not talking to robots. We're talking to individuals who have literally. So this is one of the things that I said to my special guest today, because she's my special guest. One of the things that I told her was, no one ever asks, how the hell are you doing, right? Because in my opinion, again, very unprofessional opinion, is when you come home to your family and you're still in mode of, the monsters that you deal with, the trash that you deal with, just even in, having to find those bodies, you still have to come home that day. You can't just go to a 5-star hotel and eat a shrimp cocktail and then enjoy life. You still have to come home. So we have Mrs. 164 here today, right? And tell us what 164 is.
164 is my radio number, my badge number.
Got it. Yeah, excellent. Well, before we bring her in, we're going to do a quick little pause. We're going to pause real quick, and we'll sit down and we'll talk to Mrs. 164. Awesome. Well, as promised, we would have a special guest today. Never seen before. This to me has been an honor, and it's been a privilege to have had some dialogue with Mrs. 164. Tell us your name.
Christy.
She is so awesome. And so some of the questions that we've all had for people, people who have had in the past, whenever the courts were done for the day, we run into a police officer, we run into the lawyer or, Rob or somebody on the team. We'd say, how do you guys do this? Like, this is so crazy. This is so much to handle. And this is, it's so painful. How do you do this? You go home and what do you do, right? That's a question that I've always had for Ray. How do you start up the next day? And the answer is staring right in front of us. We have the wife of Detective Ray Hermosillo with us today. And you know what? She's here just to kind of give us some insight on maybe how she's such a great woman. Like, what do you do? How was your typical day? You know, we're not going to be here too long. We just kind of wanted to pick your brain from your side of things. You know, how did you handle things? Because at the end of the day, in order for him to be recharged and go out and do his job the way he did it, which was impeccable, there was an unloading station and a recharging station. And I think that's the power that you held, right? Your daughter, your son, these are people who played an important part of his recharging his batteries. So I take my hat off for you. You are great. My wife is phenomenal. We have 7 children, and I just don't know what she does or how she does it, but she does a great job at it. I cannot imagine me going through what you went through and bringing that on top of the everyday life. And you have a job. So, question for you. First of all, how are you feeling now?
Good.
You're good.
Glad
everything's
over. Yeah.
Glad it's over. Okay, great, good. And what was a typical day for you, or an evening? Because during the day you were working, so maybe you can get your mind off of things. But an evening when you get home, what was like that for you? Like what was it?
Yeah. I mean, so when he comes home, it's, of course, we can't talk about a lot of things that were going on,
Right.
you know, but when he comes home, he's on such a high from work that it's almost like when you kind of have to walk on eggshells for a little bit because you don't know how the mood's going to be, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's either been a super stressful day for him or emotional or whatever, so you don't know how to react to that until he's home. So you have to give him space. Of course, when he comes home, I want to know all the things, but you can't
Right.
ask him those questions. And so when he comes home, you just have to give him space to kind of get the feel of, you know,
What his vibes are for
how
that
it's
night.
going to be. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
it's
And
I don't know.
And I'm assuming it was hard for you to not take your best friend and say, "Let me tell you the shit that I found today," right? Or "Let me tell you what I've heard today." Or "Hey, we were this close, but XYZ," right? I'm assuming that was hard for you.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, but sometimes you don't want to bring them into your shit,
Got it.
right? I mean, you care so much for them, you don't want to expose them to that stuff, and so you kind of try to protect them from it and keep it in. And you know, she'd ask, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing." You know, "Well, what happened today?" "Oh, it's just a normal day." And she knows I'm full of crap, right? She knows I'm lying. She can tell I'm lying, but at the same time, you don't want to bring them into the hellhole that you're living. And so you protect the ones you love. And sometimes that's not fair to her. And I recognize that now. But you don't want to bring your kids into it, your wife into it. You want to take that and say, keep that innocent thinking, the mindset, and let me. I don't need everybody down here in this freaking pit with me right now.
Got it.
You guys stay up there. Let me climb up to you eventually. But I don't. You guys don't need to be down here.
And did you know that? Did you know it from that angle that that's how he was feeling?
yeah, so I mean, after 20 years of being a police wife, it I won't say that it prepares you for it, but you by then I know how to react to him, right? So before, when he was in patrol or doing the other things, it kind of prepared you for what he's been through lately. So I already knew how to play like the emotional game with him when he comes home because you know, after 20 years I've just learned how to do that. But in this, it's I mean, I found out most of the things that were happening just like you or anybody else out there. I found out on the news, right? So I didn't know what was happening, or I just knew the basis of the story. And so for him to come home and talk about it with me is not an emotional release for him because,
Sure.
you know, the things that I couldn't know about it just like anybody else. So I would find out things just like you on the news. And so to say that he could just come home and talk to me about it and I could be a release for him really isn't fair, because that's not how we could handle it together. So for him being with all the guys every single day, I think that was more of a release don't you think it'd be fair to say that that was more of a release for you because he couldn't come home and release that?
I
Like,
couldn't
he
talk
could-
about those details with
Sure.
her to protect the integrity of the case, but those other guys who were there in the backyard with me digging stuff up, I could confide in and talk to and cry with. And I remember specifically, the day we found JJ, I came home and we had to spray off my boots for the biohazard stuff to bring them inside, and my everything I was wearing stunk from the uncovering the children. And I remember telling her, will you wash this stuff that night? And she did. She didn't ask questions. She just grabbed the stuff, put it in the washer, which I appreciated. And I remember sitting in my recliner that night, just zoned out. I had a whiskey, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I broke down. I don't know if you remember, but and you just hugged me and said it's going to be okay. And nothing was discussed of the case. She knew I was struggling, and she was there for me, and that meant a lot.
Yeah, so I can't, like I said, I can't really take that emotion for him to just dump that emotion on me because I wasn't there and I didn't know exactly everything that happened. So for him to come home and just keep all those details inside, and so really that's really all I can do for him is just make sure he's okay. I don't understand. I wasn't there. The things that he saw and dealt with that day, I'll never understand that. That's why I think for him, it's more, or any of the guys that were there, it's more of an emotional release for them to be together every single day. And as opposed to coming home to your spouse who, can't get all the details or I just don't understand all that because, I'll never be in that place that he was. So my biggest thing is just to be there for him when he needs a hug. If that's all he needs, then that's all I can be there for. So.
And we don't, and that's the thing is, like, we don't want you to be
right
in those trenches.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. If I'm walking down the street and there's 3 loose pit bulls and I get bit, I'm not going to tell you to come follow me to come find me because these dogs are loose, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. You don't want to, hey, I want to talk to you about how I feel right now because I want you to feel it with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard for you. It
Right.
really is, because women want to nurture the problem, right?
Exactly.
They want to be able to let me help you. Like when your kids fall and you scrape your knee, I know what's going on, I can help you, but if you don't tell me what's going on, I can't help you.
Right.
That's got to be so hard. I need to admit something, and when I admit it, I also want to apologize, because when I went to court, I only went a handful of times to court, and I would see everybody there, the jurors, I would see the spectators, people watching, and I would see law enforcement, and I would see the wives of law enforcement with you guys. And this is what I'm sorry for, and I apologize. The first thing that came to my mind is, why the hell are the wives here? I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's simply because it's symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
I got your back through this,
Right.
to support.
Mm-hmm.
And I apologize. I didn't know that until now. A lot of you probably would know that and seeing it, but I admit I did not know. What are you guys doing here? Like, that's weird to me, but I get it now. And it's beautiful that you guys were there to support your husbands, to make sure that, they're good through that whole thing. It's super symbolic, and I get it now. And that's very special.
and brother, she lived it.
Sure, yeah.
She lived it probably worse than I did because she was kept in the dark for most of it.
I was going to say, the worst thing that you can do to a human being is ask for help, but not tell them what's going on or how to help you.
And it's not that I didn't want to; it's that I couldn't.
Right.
You know, we had to do this right, and she was there. She lived it. She didn't know what she was living through or what I was going through a lot of the time, but I knew that if I needed to, I could always turn to her, and she was there.
That's awesome. I hope you know that you are a key piece to the case and the way that it was handled, because these men have to recharge, and women, have to recharge their batteries. They don't just keep going and going and going. They come home, they emotionally unload, or not, but they recharge their battery and go out the very next day and do the same thing.
Right.
Do you understand how much good you did just by not being able to hear the problem, but being able to at least embrace and say, I love you, I'm here for you?
Yeah, I mean, I get that. At the time, it doesn't feel like that, right? Because it's like he's so closed off with everything, and he had to be in it, and it wasn't fair for what he was going through. But so I just have to put that aside, and it almost made the kids and I, we just have to make the place, our house, a safe place for him, that he can just come home and feel that peace. And it almost made at first, when all this started, it was, just interesting to follow the storyline and all the crazy things that were happening, and then once it turned into recovery for the kids, and then that's, when we couldn't really talk about anything anymore. And so it almost made, after years went by and, he's so invested in it, and it almost made me like hateful or resentful towards everything that was going on, because it was taking so much time away from our family. We canceled vacations. He missed so much for the kids, and just a lot of things. And so it made me start getting resentful and hateful towards, of course, Chad and Lori, because not only did they mess up their families and Tammy's family and, everybody that was involved, but people don't realize what it did to all the law enforcement families, the prosecutor families. And so I started to get hateful and resentful towards all of that towards the end. And so I had to take a step back and change my thought process towards all of it, because ultimately I'm his biggest supporter, right? His number one supporter. So I had to take a step back and check myself.
Do you understand that you had all right to feel that way, though?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I hope you understand, and I hope you never feel guilty about that, because you didn't hate him, you didn't hate his decisions, you just hated the position that he was put into. And that's even hard, because it's like, well, damn it, who can I hate? Do I hate law enforcement? Do I hate the system? Do I hate Chad and Lori? Well, yeah, they caused this, but at the end of the day, he didn't raise his hand and say, hey, man, put me on everything. This is something that, that he had to do, and he did it the best he knew how to do it. But I just hope that you don't ever live your life thinking, God, I regret feeling that way. I'm glad you felt that way, because you had all the right to feel that way, because it was messed up, it was. And you want your husband, you don't, no one wants a home to be interrupted. No one. And that was an interruption.
Oh,
and,
for sure.
and you handled it super well. And the good news is you guys are here standing, right? Probably won't get a case like this that crazy. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be more cases, but maybe not, that crazy. And hopefully, it doesn't take super, a lot of time out. But I think the takeaway from this is how important you are. You need to know that. Like, everybody supports you so much, and all those other men and women who supported their wives or their husbands going out there. Because could you imagine? Okay, let me paint you a picture. You come home from dealing with the day that you dealt with. She's nagging in your ear. Where the hell have you been? How come you don't come? You're not here for dinner.
There were days like that too, trust me. It wasn't all roses.
Yeah.
So there's still
Damn
days
it, man!
like
I had
that.
your back for a
I
second.
will admit that there were still
Okay,
days
sure,
like
sure.
that.
But could you imagine, like, getting that every day and her really, like, saying, screw you, like, how do you go to work knowing, damn, now my wife, like, nothing at home is my house is not taken care of, everybody's disgruntled. That would be super hard for you to go out there and do your job. I mean, I would imagine that would be hard, right?
Yeah, and that was always in the back of your head, but you come home sometimes after a hard day, and like she said, she was there a lot of the time, but people are human, right? And so when you come home and there's problems at home, or the kids are doing something, or this is going on, you come home from a stressful day to more stress, and sometimes you're like, God damn, like I want to just
Go back to work.
I want to just veg out, like let me just process everything. And there were days like that, absolutely. Like nobody's perfect, and I wouldn't expect her to be perfect ever. So yeah, we had hard times, absolutely, and I missed a lot of the kids' stuff, and I regret that. But she was always there.
But they love you. They love you, and they get it. I'm sure it was hard. I'm positive it was hard for both you and the kids. But just understand that they love you. And this is the sacrifice. Let this be a lesson to everybody out there. You're seeing the sacrifices that these men and women make every day to make sure that us as a community are not only safe, but that cases are being solved, and they're being solved the right way. Nothing but love for you guys, honestly.
Appreciate it.
I had the privilege. I met you at a Mexican restaurant after Lori's sentencing.
Yeah.
And you stood out to me from the very beginning. From the very beginning, you've always on TV. You looked mafioso to me, and I've always said to myself, I want to meet that guy. Like he looks like a badass. I want to meet him.
Yeah.
And deep down inside, I had you're a good person. I don't have the privilege nowadays to say that, we were acquaintances, we met. You're my brother. And I hope you know that. Thank you. And I hope you know that I love you, and you guys are good people. You have a good home. Tell me a little bit about what kind of music you listen to, bro? Because everybody sees you, and you're a serious guy. You look like Donald. You could look like you'd be Donald Trump's bodyguard, bro. Like you look like you don't mess around, but you're fun, dude. Don't let this guy and the goatee fool you. He's a fun guy, man. He really is, and she is a firecracker. She is awesome. What music do you listen to?
Everything, man. From 50s, 60s,
nice,
70s, 80s, 90s, hip hop, country. Like it just depends. Like
depending on how you feel.
Yeah, it's everything.
What kind of food you like?
Everything except spicy, probably. Huh?
Okay, good. I'm with him on that. I don't like spicy.
Pizza, pasta, Mexican
Steak.
food, steak
and potatoes.
Everything.
He's a good dude, genuinely a good dude. You're a walking mystery, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? When we see you, it's like, I wonder what kind. But he's a good guy. Everybody loves him. I want you to know that the both of you are our heroes. You sustain and help him be a hero, and he's a hero because of the stuff that he did, genuinely from his heart. And not just you, brother. I know there's a gang of you out there that did it. But if you want to be called out, come and join me at this table one day, and we'll call you out. We'll make it your day. Today is your day. And I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. This case, when this case was resolved, it didn't do anything for me. I'm sure it did for the people that were, they became victims. But I still say thank you because it hurt a lot of people. And you guys did your job to bring closure and lock up two animals that belonged, behind bars for the rest of their natural lives. And, who knows if we'll ever know the truth about what happened. I guess at this point, it doesn't matter. What happened. And now I think what we need to do is heal. What does a day look like for you now? Just
it's back to just, your normal cases.
Are you good? Does that feel good?
It feels good. It feels surreal, kind of, because you've been accustomed to working on this case for 5 years, and so every day was chat and Lori, everything. So having that done it's taken me a while to get back to being normal, if you can say normal. But I just want to give a shout out to everybody that worked on this case, that I rubbed shoulders with, some of the best people that I've ever met in my entire life. Like you couldn't
The
ask for better
best
people.
men and women.
Agreed. I agree. I
We've
truly
met.
agree.
I know he's probably said it, but some of the people that we have met has just been
It's
incredible. Some
it's
of the
been a big
friendships that
family.
we have
Yeah.
are people that we'll be friends with now, forever.
Absolutely.
You go through that tragedy with people and you bond.
Yeah.
You're always going to have that. You look at like people who have been through a war or something like that. Like those tragedies bond together, and there's been countless men and women that we've worked with over this whole thing that I consider family now, and I'm sure they do the same thing. But
Yeah, I've always had, so for the past 20 years, I've had a list of great people that if I ever needed anything, I mean, those guys, they're all on speed dial, right? If I needed something. And that list is doubled now. I mean, there's no question in my mind, if I needed anything, I could call any of those guys.
That's awesome.
And they would be there for me or the kids or,
That's great.
anything.
That's really good.
So
That's great.
there's good things that came out of it. So
absolutely,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're sitting here for a reason. I will always be grateful for that. A couple of weird questions for you. Would you rather they plead out, or would you rather go to trial? Anybody, in any case. Would you rather fight in court?
it
or would you rather
depends.
plead
It
out?
depends. It depends on what you have to put those victims through, right? You don't ever want to inflict more pain on kids or victims, and so if they have to, if kids or victims have to testify, I'd rather them just plead out.
Got it. Okay.
But I want justice for those guys too, and so I've got a soft spot in my heart for kids, and if you're putting them in a situation where it's going to hurt or harm them long term, plead out.
Fair enough. I agree with that. And I agree with your statement. God's children are not for sale, and you can't mess with them. These are our children. They're beautiful. And there's a lot of children that we don't know of who are going through a lot of bad things. And we pray for these children. If you see something, say something. Larry, we will always support that phrase. If you see something, say something. If there is something out there that you know of, something you saw that looks weird, talk about it. Tell somebody before it gets too late. I want to thank you guys so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for taking the time. You're awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your feelings, and thank you for taking care of the big guy.
of course.
I appreciate you guys so much. We should have maybe a part 2 where we can talk about
Absolutely.
other things. I think that would be
Hell
a
yeah.
blast.